Hello, it's Dr. Piro again. In this video, I'm going to be teaching you how you conduct yourself in the exam hall, how you approach questions, and how you can get excellence from every question and every exam that you're going to be taking progressively. Listen attentively. The first key to success in an exam that you'll be taking, it's easy. It's called punctuality. It's a word that students scoff at most of the time. But in an exam, it becomes one of the most pressing needs for a student. You need to be punctual for your exams. This is an exam. You can't afford to be late. You can't afford to be 10, 15 minutes late. For every minute that you spend out of the exam hall, or every minute that you are delayed, indirectly or directly affects your mark. It is recommended, it's advised that you are at the exam venue before the exam, such that you prepare your mind. You can peruse the exam venue and then have a feel of that environment before you even get into the exam hall. The next key that is important in conducting yourself in the exam hall is to adhere to the instructions. What is the need for you to answer questions on the question paper that the instructions clearly states that you do not answer? Or what is the need of answering questions with the wrong instruction? It is important to read the instructions and read them twice or even 3 times, such that you are sure of the instructions and the questions and how that you are going to answer them. This is so critical because we have seen lots of students leave the exam hall in tears because they did not adhere to the instructions of the exam that they were supposed to take. It is important to read those instructions over and over again. How pathetic it is for your ladder to be against the wrong wall after you have reached the top. The next most important key when you talk about exams is time management. I already told us we need to come into the exam hall with a timepiece. It is your responsibility to get a timepiece in the exam hall before the exam starts. Why is this so important? Assuming you have 5 questions in an exam and you have 50 minutes, if you are timing yourself, that means that you have roughly 10 minutes per question. This gives you a guide already, such that when you answer your question, you can spend the required amount of time per question. That way, you can evenly touch all these questions. If you do not manage your time in the exam hall, you will come to the last questions and then you just have to write something rough there, and thereby limiting the marks that you are going to acquire from those questions. It is important to manage your time in an exam. The next key I'll be giving you is one that concerns your health and your stability in the exam hall. Never go into an exam hall without any pause. The next key I'm going to be giving you pertaining exams involves your well-being in that exam hall. Here's my advice. Do not go into the exam hall hungry. Your brain requires energy to think, and the energy that we have as humans comes from the food we eat. It is important that you go into the exam hall with some amount of energy so that our brain cells can actually think properly and attack the questions that we set before us. This is why some students faint in the exam hall, because they go into the exam without energy, without enough food, without enough nutrients for their brain and for their cells to make use of the exam hall. It is highly advised that you eat something before the exam. The next key for answering exams and approaching questions properly is what we call making an outline for your question. When you read your question in the exam hall, don't rush into it. Take a while, take a pause, look at the question again. Are you sure what the question is asking is what you have in mind? And when you are sure that what the question is asking is what you want to write, then approach the question. But when you approach a question, particularly in the essay, in the written part of the exams, this is how we go about it. We always start with a word of introduction, and we always end with a piece of conclusion, such that our answers have an opening and they have an end. Some questions require you to compare and contrast, to list the differences between. In those questions, it is better to answer those questions using a table. When you answer those questions in tabular forms, you give the examiner a 1 moment's glance at your mind and at your answers, and then they can contrast and compare these differences as the question demands. Some questions may require you to draw, and some students are fond of minimizing the answer booklets in the exam hall. Do not join them. When they ask you to draw, draw. And draw appreciably, such that your diagram is big enough to be seen. When it's seen, it is scored. And when it is scored, marks are coming to you, and that is how excellence is attained. It is always important, as I say, extra is better in the exam. There is no point to take back the answers from the exam hall. So when you have any answer, even if you think it is just barely related to the question, it is more advised that you leave them in the exam hall than to leave the exam hall with your answers. Outside the exam hall, your answers have less value, but within that exam hall, they can translate to marks for you. Outside the exam hall, you apply your understanding and your knowledge, but in the exam hall, you get all the marks that you can get. Finally, manage your time. There is no need to cheat in an exam. The consequence of cheating in some exams is disqualification, and then all your preparation, all your effort becomes null and void. Those communications, those notes, those papers, those things that we take into the exam hall to implicate ourselves are better left outside. When you look at it very well, sometimes preparing for the exam the right way is even easier than the stress and all the manipulations we have to do to get those things into the exam hall. With this, I believe if you tackle any exams with this advice, you would get excellence in your exams. Watch out for the next series of videos in Campus 101, where we'll be teaching you other important techniques that you can apply in education for excellence.